I've just been told that Stephen Andrew has now arrived and Marianne Alto should be here shortly. There he is. Welcome. So we'll be getting started very shortly. Thank you so much for your patience. Welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you are here this afternoon for this mayoral debate, and also happy that all three, yes, it is. I'm good here. If you can turn it up, that'd be great, James. As I said, welcome to all of you who have gathered here today for this mayoral debate, and for those who will be listening to this online through Zoom this afternoon. We will also be recording it, so it will be available on YouTube for those who want to go back over this couple of hours and listen once again, or for those that you know who might be interested and who haven't had a chance to actually hear this. My name is Sandra Severs. I'm the president of the Downtown Victoria Residents Association, and we are the sponsors of this event this afternoon. For those of you who don't know anything about the downtown east side, or downtown east side, excuse me. As Marianne said, that is a previous life in which that was a community that I worked in. So yes, the downtown of Victoria. The DRA's mission is to foster a diverse and vibrant and safe downtown. And we promote activities and opportunities for people to connect with each other and to have a sense of what it's like to live in the downtown, because we believe that the downtown is a great place to live. So that's who we are. I think Diane at the door was handing out cards if you want to know anything more about us. As we begin this afternoon, we want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people, known as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and that we give thanks for the opportunity to live and work and play on these lands. And I know as a first generation settler to these lands with parents who left after the Second World War from England and Wales, that I am really grateful to be on this land and to have an opportunity to learn about this land. And that as I've been here 5 years in Victoria, and that I appreciate the opportunity to learn more about where we live in this downtown. Finally, I want to introduce to you Shannon Waters, who's going to be our moderator this afternoon. Shannon began her reporting career in a radio newsroom in Prince George and spent the past 5 years covering provincial politics as the founding reporter with BC Today. And she recently joined the Capital Daily to cover municipal politics across the Capital Region. So we are grateful to Shannon to be here this afternoon and to moderate this very interesting debate in this very interesting election and interesting time. So please welcome Shannon.
Hello again, and welcome to the three candidates who are joining us today. As mentioned, my name's Shannon Waters. I work for Capital Daily now. I also grew up in Victoria, but I hadn't lived here in a long time until I came back in 2017 following the provincial election, and it's been really wonderful to be back in the city I grew up in and where my parents and my sister still live. So I'm going to lay out some of the ground rules, both for our candidates and for yourselves, and tell you a little bit about how this debate is going to go. So the questions for the debate today were developed with input from local residents and were finalized by the DRA's board of directors. In order to cover as much ground as possible with the candidates that we have here, we've developed 3 different types of questions. Open-ended questions that will be asked of all 3 candidates, giving each 90 seconds to cover the question asked. And then we're going to have a lightning round of yes or no questions where candidates will then have 30 seconds for a response. So what we're looking for there is a yes or a no off the top, and then you'll have a little bit of time to add some context or nuance to your answer as well. And then we are going to have how questions, which will be going to each candidate as well. And they will have 90 seconds to explain how they would enact a specific item that's contained in their platform if they're elected. So one other thing that the candidates will notice on their little tray tables are a stack of tokens, similar to what you might find at a friendly poker game. And these tokens can be used by each candidate. They each have 4, and they can be used one at a time to buy some additional time on your answer. So if you get to the end of your time, you'll notice there's a clock front and center there where you can keep an eye on how much time you have left, and you will get a 10-second warning just to remind you. But if you get to the end of one of your long form or how answers and you haven't managed to hit all the points you were hoping to, you can drop one of those tokens into a jar, which I see Marianne has filled with water, so you can use your drinking glass instead. I'm also a person who drinks out of jam jars at home, so I can understand that one. So you take a token, you can drop it in the glass, and you'll get an extra 30 seconds on your answer. You cannot use the tokens in the lightning round. The point of that round is to have you be as concise as possible, but if for the how questions and for the long forms, you can buy yourselves 30 seconds at a time. The tokens are use them or lose them. So if you haven't used any by the time we get to the end of the debate, that's your decision. I don't think you can take them home, no. There is not going to be a live question section to this debate, just because in terms of organizing with the online folks as well, it gets a bit complicated. But as I said, the questions have been developed with input from residents. So I'm hoping you'll hear questions that you are hoping to have answered today. Rules of etiquette for the people on the stage. Please respect the clock. We have a limited amount of time and we want everybody to be able to get through all of their answers. You will be given a warning. You do have the opportunity to extend your time. If you are not wrapping up your answer when you're done, James there in the front is able to cut your microphone. Move along. Thanks for the illustration. So you'll get the warning, you'll get time to kind of wrap your sentence. And if you just keep going, we're going to cut you off. Please make it easy for the audience to listen to the responses that are being given. You each have a microphone that you'll be able to use, and we'll pause if we have any audio issues there, but please don't interrupt other candidates, no interjections. Everybody's going to get the same amount of time at the end. And what we are looking for in terms of your answers is staying issues focused and forward looking. So we want to hear your ideas for improving life downtown rather than criticism of your fellow candidates or how the past council has handled things, et cetera, et cetera. Please avoid personal references and criticism of your fellow candidates. If we start getting into that territory, I will interrupt and just try and guide you back to the question. For those in the audience, we're asking you to please hold your applause until the candidates are making their closing statements. Again, this is in the interest of time, so that we can keep moving things along and aren't subject to interruptions. Please don't yell questions or comments during the debate. Again, that's going to make it difficult for people to hear and will constitute an interruption. If you are being disruptive, you may be asked to leave. Consider this a fair warning. The debate is being captioned, as you can see here on the screen. And for those of you who are listening or watching online, if there are also captioning options available, you'll find a link in the chat on the Zoom or in the comments on the YouTube section. So everybody understand the ground rules. Okay, so the first section of the debate is going to allow our candidates to introduce themselves. And I just need my little rundown here so I know how we're handling that. Too many pieces of paper. There we go. So we're going to do 2-minute statements for introductions. And since he was the first one in the room, we'll start with Brendan Marshall.
Hello, everybody, and it's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Brendan Marshall, and I'm was born and raised in Victoria. Grew up in James Bay. I currently live in Esquimalt with my wife. We have a little cafe on Esquimalt Road, Sunnyside Cafe. We have 2 young children. Our youngest just started school this year in kindergarten, and I'm running for mayor. And I'm really excited to be here and to do this. So thank you for coming out today.
All right, short and sweet. So we will proceed across the stage. Next candidate, Stephen Andrew.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to acknowledge before I begin that we are on the traditional lands of the Algonquin-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nation. As you just heard, my name is Stephen Andrew. I do live in Victoria, actually in Victoria. I live in the beautiful community of Burnside Gorge, which is astounding how that community is growing. I live there with my husband, Danny. We've been together 30 years. I am a cancer survivor. I have been a former journalist, and I also managed a Canadian cancer charity and sat on the board of that charity. And I am really thrilled. I was elected in the by-election in 2020, and I am so thrilled to be here because to see all of you here, and I saw a picture of everyone online, that you are so engaged in municipal politics. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and thank you very much for your interest and being here to keep us on our toes. Thank you.
And last but not least, in terms of introduction, Marianne Alto.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marianne. I've been a 3-term counselor. Seems sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. I thank Stephen for making the acknowledgement of the land and territory, and I think it's today at the National Memorial for Fallen Police and Peace Officers, and so it was a moment that's different than today. And so I just wanted to let you know that if we're a bit lower in energy for a few minutes, I think we're still feeling the reverberation of that very moving experience. As I say, I'm a 3-term counselor. I've been involved in community work for over 3 decades. I have 2 kids, both young men now, and I take pride in that because they're awfully decent young men. I think that's a really important thing to have in our community. I've spent most of my life here in Victoria, 33 years, working with a variety of different community groups from way back when there were women's groups and activists dealing with equality issues, into the harm reduction field with AIDS Vancouver Island and AIDS Vancouver, dealing with folks who are surviving now with HIV and AIDS, and all different types of organizations. For me, community is the basis of the city. It's why I do this work. We don't do it, I think Stephen is saying, we don't do it because it pays a lot. We do it because we see this as a vehicle to make change, and to make change for the better of the community. You people are here because community more than we do, and you want to make sure that you understand what we bring to the table if you elect us. I think it's really critical for you to understand that we are here because of you. You will make the choice, and whoever is successful on the 15th will be your voice. So please choose carefully. Please vote, not often, but get lots of people who do. And please take this really seriously, because the next 4 years in the city are going to be incredibly challenging, and the choice you make will direct that future. Thank you.
Thanks to all 3 of you. Good sign. Everybody stayed within the time boundaries for opening statements, because now we're moving into the longer form open-ended questions. So these are on various themes. We're going to do 3 questions, and then we'll move on to the lightning round and come back to some longer form answers later. So what I'm going to do is I will read the theme of the question and then the order in which the candidates are going to be able to answer, and then I'll ask the question itself. So our first question on longer form is on climate leadership. And Stephen will have the first answer, followed by Brendan, followed by Marianne. We'll be mixing this up as we go through. Here's the question itself. These next 4 years will be a critical decision-making time if the city is to meet its 2030 targets as outlined in the Climate Leadership Plan. What specific actions do you propose to ensure that the city meets its environmental commitments and emissions reductions targets? Stephen Andrews first and has 90 seconds.
Thank you. Climate change is very, very important. Certainly, I see some of the actions I would like to bring to the table is a green port, making sure that we have shore power there. I would like to escalate our commitment to having electric vehicles on the road. We need to look at some of the multimodal transportation that we have. Definitely the biggest contributor to greenhouse gases in Victoria is cars and vehicles. I think that we need to increase the drivability of cars so that we're not idling at stop signs and traffic lights and in the congestion downtown. We have to look at that. And by using more multimodal transportation, I think we can get more people to bikes, onto scooters, and also create some zero emission and areas in the downtown core, and making our city more of a bikeable and walkable city. But definitely, I think the issues that we need to do is focus on the major pollution that we're seeing from our vehicles, and obviously the contribution that we get from the cruise ships.
Fantastic. And then a couple seconds to spare. All right, Brendan is next and has 90 seconds to respond.
Well, I think air and a clean climate in the city is absolutely paramount for Victoria. We have been a beautiful, clean city for many, many years. And I think that quite often politicians and people in authority, sometimes they make, they talk about certain solutions, and sometimes those solutions can be incredibly expensive and not effective. But I think what we do need to do is definitely focus on, and I would fix the situation with the bike lane traffic lights, stop vehicles from idling too long. We see a lot of that now, and also improving the safety in the city to encourage people to get out and walk and ride their bikes to work and use vehicles less. And I was just talking to a guy the other day who said, he stopped riding his bike to work because it's been stolen, and he's worried about it being stolen. So I think we can address that and make the city a beautiful, clean air place, and focus on idling and that sort of thing in the city, as well as promoting more green space for people to enjoy. And yeah, so that's about it.
Thank you. And again, with a few seconds to spare, appreciate it. I do like when politicians are willing to obey the parameters of an event that they're participating in. So third, answering this first long form question is Marianne with 90 seconds to respond.
Thanks for the question. I don't think there's anything more important to what we're going to be doing in the next 4 years in addressing climate change and climate adaptation. My kids talk to me regularly about how they expect when they're my age to have difficulty breathing and that they won't have water to drink. When I think of that, I think it's terrifying. And I have an absolute obligation to make sure that world does not appear. In Victoria, we have several fantastic action plans already. We mentioned already the Go Victoria one, the Go Victoria one that speaks about transportation. I'm not going to talk about that today because you can look it up, but the one that's most important is the climate action strategy, and that deals with a whole variety of different activities that the city can do, must do, and can achieve. Chief among them is the major contributor to GHGs in the city is actually the energy that we put out from our buildings. And we have an ability to change that within the city buildings, and that is underway because we have a number of retrofits going. We also have to deal with retrofits for heritage buildings. They're the worst polluters from GHG in the city. We can make that change by offering different types of rewards and incentives, and we can do that. That's in my platform. The other aspect of GHGs for us is making sure that we do the right types of step 3 building for new buildings and retrofits for older buildings, to make sure that people in the private sector know that it's to their benefit to make these retrofits, because we're not just saving our kids, we're saving theirs, and they can make money on it. We've proven it. Doing green retrofits in new construction and older construction is absolutely something that succeeds, and we just need to make sure that people in the private and public sector know how to do that.
Fantastic. Everybody stay with us. All right, question 2 is on housing affordability. And this time, Brendan will be first to respond, followed by Marianne and Stephen will be giving the answer to this one. Here's the question. Housing costs in Victoria have spiraled out of control as supply has been stagnating while population and housing demand accelerates. Affordable rental stock is being purchased by real estate investment trusts. Rents are increasing at a pace that many people cannot afford. What do you see as the major roadblocks to increasing Victoria's housing supply, and how will you remove them? Brendan, you have 90 seconds.
Well, I think that, when you look at the numbers, it's just incredible how far behind we are on the housing stock, given that, being over 6,000 units behind. I think we really need to, come up with a blanket zoning that's going to fast track the ability for builders to create housing and to do it at a better cost. But at the same time, we need to do it tastefully. Obviously, that's the biggest concern, I think, with residents. I really do believe that we can make incentives for developers to come up with affordable housing and to do it tastefully. I really do. I think that a lot of the red tape that we see that we've seen, we need to eliminate and move forward in that respect.
Great, thank you very much. Please hold your applause till the end, or we're going to end up being here until, I don't know, it gets dark outside, which is happening earlier and earlier now. So second response goes to Marianne and 90 seconds.
Thanks for the question. If there's ever a second thing that's important after climate change, it's housing, and it's affordable housing. City already has in place a number of really fantastic programs, our villages and corridor plans, the rapid deployment of affordable housing strategy, the priorities that put rental and not-for-profit and cooperative housing at the front of the lane whenever we're trying to look at approvals. All of those things are working. They can work better. We can accelerate them all. We missed a huge opportunity by not making a decision on missing middle housing, in my view. We did have an opportunity on that last day to make two really important amendments that got no press whatsoever, and that was to limit height and to double the contributions that developers had to contribute to our Affordable Housing Trust Fund when they couldn't actually provide affordable housing on a particular site. Those two things solved almost all of the issues that most people had brought to our attention, and the fact that we didn't move forward with that, I think, was a huge missed opportunity. That being said, the new council will have a chance to reconsider some type of missing middle housing process. And I think that if we don't actually act on that sooner than later, we're going to be faced with more and more stories that have come to all of us. The young man who said, "How long are you going to make me to wait to come home?" We have to act on this. We have the ability to do it. We have the ability to accelerate it. We have the ability to do it well. If we don't act on housing, we are going to have thousands of people standing, waiting to come in. And those people are ours. There are kids, there are families, there are people who need to be here. We cannot shut the door. No one told me I couldn't come home when I came back from university. We cannot say the same thing to others.
And just as time runs out. So our third speaker to this question is Stephen Andrew with 90 seconds.
We definitely have to move forward on housing. The missing middle housing idea as it currently is written is immature policy. It needs to be reviewed, and certainly when it comes back before council, I will endeavor to get it through. But a policy that splits our community in half, literally, is not a good policy. So we need to adapt it. We need to ensure that it is providing accessible suites for those that are here. If you look at my platform at stephenandrew.ca on housing, you'll see that I have a number of issues that we can actually do today. We don't need any involvement and change in bylaws. We can do that through ensuring that we have take single family homes and duplex them, have them duplex with suites, increase the size of carriage houses. And some of the initiatives that we have already put in place as a council, such that was a unanimous decision, and I totally support it, was using not-for-profit housing, making sure that that can jump to the front of the line and it can be built without having to go through an approval process as long as it follows the OCP. Those kind of guidelines are the initiatives that I would want to advance. So we are absolutely certain that we can get that housing built and quickly, and we need to get the more than 5,200 homes that are already built in the ground and working.
Thank you so much. On to question 3. The theme of this one is neighborhood boundaries. And this time around, the order will be Marianne, Brendan, and then, oh no, Marianne, Stephen, and then Brendan, sorry. So here's the question itself. It's focused on the northern boundary of the downtown neighborhood, which currently ends around Chatham and Caledonia streets. There's a lot of redevelopment going on in this area around Capitol Iron and south of Bay with the start of work on the Arts and Innovation District. Nearby, further land development is likely as local First Nations consider the future of the Rock Bay lands. When you think about the future of this part of the city, what do you see as potential advantages and disadvantages of potentially moving the neighborhood boundary? So Marianne is up first with 90 seconds.
That's a great question. Speaking totally personally, I actually think the boundary for north of downtown should be Bay Street. It seems to me that all of the planned development that's happening north of Caledonia is going to be highly residential with some really innovative arts and culture and Indigenous features as well, as Shannon mentioned. And so to me, there is a significant rapid change happening in those blocks just south of Bay Street. And for us to be able to look at that as a downtown neighborhood makes just so much sense to me. The combination that we're going to have there of some very light industrial, some creative arts and culture pieces, some Indigenous business, and a lot of residential, I think, is a perfect acceleration of what the best of downtown can be and what a lot of it is south of the Caledonia. So there are some issues with Burnside Gorge, and because I'm the current liaison to Burnside Gorge, I'm very, very well aware of them. There is a concern about the loss of support and income for Burnside Gorge as a neighborhood because they now include that portion. But I actually think that we can have a conversation between the DRA and the Burnside Gorge Community Association and actually figure out a way to make sure that they don't lose anything while downtown actually not gains so much as it just evolves naturally into what it actually is. Even if we do nothing, frankly, by the time we're sitting here again in 10 years, that will be downtown. It's the evolution of what's happening there. And I would rather manage that transition than let it happen without any type of oversight or any type of planning. So I'm a big fan of not random planning, but actually managed planning. And I think this is a perfect opportunity.
Thank you. Next up is Stephen with 90 seconds to respond.
As you know, I live in Burnside Gorge, and I've been involved in the planning that's going on in that community. Burnside Gorge does not support moving the line because of the work that they've done over many years to work on developing its community. The local area plan includes the development in south of Bay Street. I think that definitely has to be a conversation. We have to collaborate on that. And I actually think it's going to be to the benefit of the city if we can bring Burnside Gorge and the downtown neighborhoods together so we can plan together and move it forward. One of the challenges that we've had at the table is we've not been listening to the communities. So rather than come from a top-down approach and say, we're going to change it as a council, I would like to sit down with both neighborhoods and find out how we can work collaboratively together to envision what our downtown should be like. It really shouldn't be to two community associations. It's our downtown, Victoria's downtown. And we all need to work together to get involved in how we're going to develop it and what we want to see as a community in that area.
Thank you. And now we're on to Brendan with 90 seconds to respond.
Well, I think that there's some incredible opportunities in that area. Myself, I would be in favor of expanding that boundary and focusing on building a vibrant neighborhood that's that people from all walks of life and age groups have opportunities to be involved in and to live. And I would definitely be interested in providing incentives for rental housings and not just small rental housing, but 2- and 3-bedroom rental and strata. So young families can get their feet planted and have, potentially, well streamlined buildings with good amount of green space and a mixture of I would love to see a mixture of commercial and residential and possibly even light industrial down there, and have a real mix and a collective mix neighborhood, but could be really beneficial to young people. And I think that we could do it very tastefully and always, you have to have collaboration. You have to bring people in from the surrounding neighborhoods. And I think that we're going to have a tremendous amount of input. You see the enthusiasm of people in Victoria these days. I think we could come up with something very tasteful.
Thank you for that. We're now going to shake things up a bit. It's time for our lightning round. So just as a reminder to the candidates, we are looking for a yes or no answer off the top, and you'll have 30 seconds to build out a little more detail around that answer. Understanding that, very few issues are black and white, so saying yes or no can be difficult, but that is what we are asking of you in this round. So this time we are going to go Brendan and then Stephen and then Marianne. So our first question in the lightning round: washroom access should be provided on the 900 block of Pandora after 9 p.m. Yes or no? 30 seconds.
Well, I would say yes. I have to say yes. When you have to go, you got to go. And I know that is becoming, but I think we have to do it safe. I think that we have to have space where people can feel safe to be able to walk around, and that when they go to the wash, they're not going to be accosted. I think that that's very important.
And Stephen.
Answer yes, and we can easily be done. Many of the service providers in that area should have their washrooms open 24/7. I think it's silly to me that we have consumption sites that are on that stretch of road that close their washrooms at 8 o'clock. So I think we should have 24/7 washrooms.
Thank you very much. And Marianne.
Yes, but it also has to be included in a variety of other supportive services. There's no way that just putting washrooms in 924 hours a day is going to do the job. It'll do one job, obviously, maybe two. But really more importantly, I think that we have to look at that as one component of what services need to be there. The city's already looking at the possibility of having essentially a block manager for that in concert with some of the service providers. That's just the beginning. Washrooms, yes. More than washrooms, yes.
All right. Question number 2 in our lightning round. This time we are going to go Stephen, Marianne, and Brendan. So here's our second lightning round question. Increasing the number of housing units built will result in greater housing affordability. Yes or no? And Stephen.
It is, I'm going to say yes, with the right conditions. And we need to make sure that they are the right conditions. If we want to reduce the cost of housing to a level that's attainable for those that are concerned about it, I think what we need to do is build that housing, not just increase the number of houses and homes have.
Fantastic. Marianne's up next.
Yes, build more, build more, build more. Make sure that they're the right type in the right place. Make sure that the distribution is throughout the entire city so that all of the neighbors do the gradual growing that we know is inevitable. We have to do it in a managed way. We have to provide rewards to make sure that the right areas, and that some of those include cooperative, not-for-profit, as well as targeted lower income rentals. We can't ignore the rental system. We have to build more of that first. But yes, more and more and more is necessary.
All right. And now, Brendan, 30 seconds.
I would definitely say yes. I think we need to build more. We have to do it tastefully. We have to do it with various people from economic positions in mind. Rental for families, I think, is really important. But, like I said before, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments are very important. But young own too, so more strata, but I think we can do it tastefully and we can do it for everybody.
Great, thanks so much. And the final question in our lightning round, this time it is going to be Marianne, Stephen, and then Brendan. Final question in the lightning round. Police budgets should be increased until there is a marked decrease in public disorder on the streets of Victoria. Yes or no?
Yes, as long as we're supplementing that with a really robust series of civilian crisis response teams, which we have right now. As we have more civilian professionals on the non-criminal crises that are plaguing our streets, police have a chance to do the work they do so very well, and that is preventing and responding to crime. Both of those things can coexist. They must coexist. Our police chief agrees with that, and we have the ability as a city to put more resources into the civilian programs that are growing and being effective, and then look at more police costs, more police.
And our first cutoff of the afternoon. All right, Stephen is up next with 30 seconds to answer the question.
Yes, we are not going to police our way out of some of the mental health and addictions issues that we see downtown. We need to find other forms of assistance in that area. But yes, we need to have more police. We definitely need to ensure that we increase the number of officers to deal with the ACT teams, the assertive community teams downtown, and the crisis teams. So yes, let's do it. And we need to do it immediately and not wait for a scramble to get on board and give us the no.
Thank you. And now it's Brendan's turn with 30 seconds.
And I would definitely say yes. I mean, we have to fund our police department, that they have the resources that they can handle the real, you know, the serious crimes and all the in-between crimes, but also there's a diverse amount of problems that are happening here. And but I do think that we need more, and we need to see more people more cops on the beat, more bike police forth. So yeah.
And that's the conclusion of our lightning round. We're going to be going back to the long form questions now. So just as a reminder, candidates have 90 seconds to answer the question. They can buy themselves an extra 30 seconds with the token if needed. So the first question, the theme is urban livability. And this time we'll be going Stephen, Brendan, and then Marianne. So here's the question. Residents of Victoria, both housed and unhoused, have expressed concern about their safety on downtown streets. Recognizing this is a complex and difficult situation to address, as well as not solely a municipal responsibility, what are the primary tools you see available to City Council to alleviate suffering and limit the negative impacts of this situation? Stephen, with 90 seconds.
Thank you. Definitely, I think that we need to set an example from the council table, and that we rid ourselves of this idea that if we reduce the number of police in our police department, then we're going to be able to move that money over into health services. That is not going to happen because they are different. People understand it, they're different budgets. We need to work on a plan that really began in 2007, 2008, that said, let's meet those individuals on an individual basis rather than come up with blank solutions. And I think that that is something that we definitely need to do. We need to look at a way that we will meet the individuals in the downtown core that are in crisis situation and find a way to lift them out of the challenge that they face, rather than say, if we come in with one blanket solution, that it's going to work. It's not. Dr. Perry Kendall, the provincial health minister at the time, and the late Ted Hughes came with a brilliant report to council, and it's been almost forgotten. So that's definitely one of the things that we need to do. We also need to set an example and expectation that we are not going to tolerate criminal behavior. That doesn't mean we are going to criminalize mental health. It doesn't mean that we are going to criminalize addictions. What we're going to do is we are going to deal with the criminals that are coming in, preying on the people that are our vulnerable population. They are more likely the target of criminality than they are of actually bringing criminals to bring criminality to the table. We need to ensure that we are setting an example from the council table that we will not tolerate this.
Thank you very much, Stephen. The first use of a 30-second token right there. And perhaps speaking to the complexity of the issue, still not enough time to complete a full answer. I empathize with that. So the second respondent to this question is Brendan with 90 seconds.
Well, I think that, you know, it's getting harder and harder to live downtown. I mean, all you have to do is just ask someone that lives down in the Harris Green area, and they'll tell you, you know, it's getting pretty bad down there. And, you know, people are, residents down there are less and less likely to use the green spaces that we have. And I think that we really need to really form some strong boundaries around what is acceptable, and that what we're willing to live with, you know, as far as is camping in the parks and on the sidewalks. But that is also a very complex problem, and we absolutely need to hold the province to account, province's feet to the fire, and say, look, you know, this is a lot more than the city can bear. We need more from the provincial and the federal government at that, in order to create more efficient pivot programs and more proper help for people with mental health and drug addictions. So I think that moving forward that way is definitely something that we absolutely have to in Victoria. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. And now it's Marianne's turn.
Anticipating needing this?
We're gonna just be proactive about use of tokens here. So 2 minutes.
So I heard the question of talking about the comfort and safety of downtown residents. And for me, that comes with downtown residents who have a place to live and people who don't. So let's start with the people who don't. That's not entirely the responsibility of the city, primarily the responsibility of the province. And we've done good work with the province. And I think it's important to note that, and that good work can continue as long as we're equal partners and we push. Without housing, then these folks have no other options. And that housing has to be tailored to individuals. So this isn't just shop them into a hotel and leave them there. This is putting them into a place where you have the ability to have the supports that are needed individual by an individual to change their lives. That can happen. We can make that work. For people who actually already have houses and have the ability to be downtown residents that are inside, this talks more about 3 different sections for me. It talks about social spaces where people who begin to live in smaller and smaller private spaces need to have much better public spaces. So we're talking about a real accelerator work towards green spaces, open spaces, plazas, parklets, any place where people can actually meet and create the relationships that create a community. The second thing we need is health services. And we've been talking for years now about what the municipality can do for that, which isn't much usually, but we actually have examples throughout British Columbia where municipal practice enticements professionals to move to different places. Specifically policing, which is important, and community policing, in my view, is where we go because we have excellent examples already of community police officers who know exactly where they are and how to make those relationships, but also around creating the comfort of making sure our city looks clean again. The last 2 years, we haven't done a hell of a lot because we've actually been dealing with COVID. Now we need to turn our attentions back to doing the type of regular maintenance, plantings, gardenings, cleanup, different types of security. We can do it.
Just as the time runs out. Okay. Question 8 is about governance. This time, Brendan will respond first, and then Marianne, and then Stephen. Here's the question. Earlier this year, City Council received a performance audit that called into question some of its practices. It was dismissed by some quarters as a snapshot in time, but it does reflect serious concerns from citizens about how elected officials govern. What will you do to address the recommendations made in the report around the audit? And how will you move forward to ensure that there is increased genuine public engagement in Victoria? Brendan's up first with 90 seconds.
Well, I think that, after looking at the report, it's, fairly evident that we really need to do something in that regard. And I think that I would start by looking deep at the inefficiencies of what's been happening down at City Hall. I think that it's quite surprising that we don't have a code of conduct. I think that it's very important that we do. Quite often, I think we get, mayor and council kind of making it seem like they're managers when there's the city staff and a city manager that know their jobs well and that can get the job done. And I think we need a code of conduct to stay in the right direction down there. Also, an integrity commissioner. I think that it's important that we have that. And mainly a code of conduct and an integrity commissioner is I think is absolutely paramount to have a good governance, and so that everyone stays in their lane and focuses on the tasks that they are there to do and that they're supposed to do. And I think it's quite simple. I think things get quite complicated by elected officials in some cases, and I think we need to focus on really getting back into our lanes and focus on what we're supposed to be doing.
Thank you. And now it's Marianne's turn with 90 seconds to respond.
Thanks for this. I'll just remind folks that it's actually with City Council that asked for the governance review, and it's a really good one. Most of it, I think, actually should be acted on. I will say that I found it a bit ironic because back in 2012 and then again in 2014, former Councilor Chris Coleman and I actually wrote a code of conduct for the city, and we tried to introduce it, and it was voted down roundly by the council of the day. Fast forward now, I'm really impressed with the fact that the province has actually brought in regulations and legislation requiring different councils, all councils, to at least consider a code of conduct within 6 months of them being elected. So that puts us in April. For sure, I think that's absolutely the primary piece here. We spend far too much time repeating one another. It's important to be able to be at a board and say, yeah, I agree with my colleague Joe, and that's all I have to say, because we vote every day over and over and over again on issues that we continue to repeat ourselves about. That's a bit about facilitation as opposed to necessarily a code of conduct or an integrity commissioner. I think an integrity commissioner is an interesting idea. It works well in Vancouver, but we need to look at its application here and how it would work. Meanwhile, what we really need in the chair is somebody who knows how to facilitate meetings and can do that in a gentle way to make sure that people have the ability to express themselves and have robust debate and disagree, but do it in a way that's a bit more efficient. We do not need to spend 9 hours at a meeting. No other board would do that. And if you have a decent facilitator in the chair who understands the rules and regulations and also
Thank you. Applause held to the end, please. Stephen's turn with 90 seconds to respond.
Thank you. What will I do? I will enact all 30 recommendations from the governor's report to ensure that they are implemented within the 6 months. And that includes the code of conduct, which I called for months ago, and the integrity commissioner. As to running meetings, I would certainly look to my colleagues at the council table, open up the procedural bylaws to ensure that we can tighten up those meetings. To the comment of an effective chair, I've sat on many boards, and I can tell you that I run a meeting very efficiently and stay on target. I say there's no reason in the world why we start our council meetings at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then we're there until sometimes on Thursdays with public hearings until 1 a.m. So we need to change that. We need to ensure that's not happening. One of the key aspects of the governance report is that we get down to the business of doing the job of council. And a typical example of that is in a public hearing. We start a public hearing at 6:30, which I believe we can start sooner. And what we could then do is we have a poetry reading, and then we have a whole bunch of people speaking on a topic that really isn't germane to what we are considering that night. We should have special town hall meetings where we listen to the public so we can get on with the job of the governance business and deal with land issues. So in summary, move the all 30 recommendations forward and ensure that we run tight, focused meetings.
Thank you. As a municipal reporter who regularly covers those meetings, I would very much appreciate if they were very concise and didn't last until 1 o'clock in the morning. All right, our third question in this long form section is on reconciliation. This time, Marianne will answer first, followed by Brendan and then Stephen. Here's the question. All right, let it be noted, Marianne is asking for 30 seconds before even hearing the question. We'd like to hear what you think the city has done well regarding reconciliation. What actions have resulted in positive changes to the city's relationship with Indigenous peoples, as well as how you would respond to the 32 calls to action recently presented by the city family. And just to make this question a little more interesting, I'd recommend candidates address this one first in their response. Would you be willing to learn to offer greetings in Lekwungen as part of your role as mayor? Marianne is up first with 2 minutes.
Yes to the last part. That's a common practice now in many countries where the territory in which you're sitting begins your opening with some type of a short statement in the local Indigenous language. It's not easy. I've tried some of it already, but it certainly is something that has to be done. This is an impossible question to answer in 2 minutes, but I will just hit a couple of highlights. It's been my privilege to be part of this work for the last 10 years, and it is life-changing. It is life-changing for an individual. It is life-changing for a city. Victoria is now known as really a leading light in its relationship with its local nations. The city that sits on their territories now has an incredible relationship with both nations, not just with their chiefs and their councils, but with their members. That's because we've just shown up. We've been time they needed something, and even when they didn't, we've opened the doors and opened our hearts and been vulnerable and been able to look at a way for us to actually use Indigenous principles of action, of decision-making, of living, and do that in a way which balances it in a corporate world, which is no easy task. There is so much more for us to do. The 32 recommendations that were presented at the last reconciliation dialogue, for those of you who might have been there, are very clear. They're very demanding. They're based not on the TRC or anything that comes out of a general book, but they're based on what can happen in this city, in this territory with these people. Every single one of them is doable. Every single one of them is important, and every single one of them will get done. A piece of work that has changed the face of the city. Other than this, I challenge you to talk to me about what that is. This is the future of our city because it's a shared future where we actually acknowledge the prosperity that we enjoy should be there for the nations as well. We are true partners. We have done the work so far. There is a lot more for us to do. And for me, this is an absolute priority.
Thank you. And now it's Brendan's turn with 90 seconds on the clock.
Well, I think that reconciliation is absolutely very, very important. It's near and dear to me. I think that all too often, we have politicians making apologies from their thrones, and it just doesn't always feel all that authentic to me. So I'd like to bring back a real authentic aspect to reconciliation, and really, because I think real healing comes from the heart, and I think we need to really focus on that. We need to focus on. I would most definitely love to work with the local First Nations and assure that we can open up doors and pathways for Aboriginal people to have better access to be involved and have better economic opportunities in the city. I think is really important, and yeah, it's something very important, and I think that it needs to be out in the open. I think that reconciliation is something, if we're gonna heal together, move forward, it needs to be out in the open. And I think that having closed door groups in the city, such as the city family, I don't feel right about those. I think that it really needs to be out in the open. I think that everyone needs to be involved. I think it's very important that we have that healing. I would be very happy to be involved with First Nations and creating a world-class tourist destination, so people can come and First Nations can showcase their amazing history and art and culture, and really show the beautiful side to the First Nations culture that sometimes gets sort of put to the.
Thanks for that. And a 2-minute answer there. And now we're on to Stephen with 90 seconds to start.
Begin. I just need to ask somebody to grab me some juice, orange juice, please. I'm going to need it. I think that reconciliation needs to be woven into our entire work that we do. I see it as an intergovernmental relation. Marianne referred to the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations that were made. Absolutely, we need to adapt those. But one of the things that I've learned in my time reporting and being involved at the council table is we must sit and listen to the Algonquin speaking peoples, the Esquimalt and the Sandwich Nations. We need to have that relationship. We need to build on it. I was very lucky and honored on Canada Day, for instance. One of the things that we have done is to establish a welcoming ceremony for Canada Day, where their voices were absolutely heard. One of the things that struck me in that conversation was today we were allowed to tell our story, allowed to sing our songs. We need to open up those gates, those barriers, and work with them even more than we have over the past 4 to 8 years. We need to ensure that they are partners, they can walk with us, and we can walk with them and ensure that all needs are respected. Thank you.
Thanks for that. That concludes our second round of long form questions. We're now going to be moving into the how section. So in this section, each candidate is going to respond to 2 questions that are focused on specific proposals or policies within their platforms. And they'll have 90 seconds to respond. Again, can use tokens if you are looking for a longer response. So this time we're going to start with Brendan. And here's your first question. On your campaign website, under the banner of livability, you reference increases in homelessness and crime despite millions spent by the current council on the issue. I'll just pause for a second there. Okay. Sorry, I just lost my place in the middle of the question there. On your campaign website, under the banner of livability, you reference increases in homelessness and crime despite millions of dollars spent by the current council. However, your platform commitments to livability don't offer much in terms of specific solutions to the issue of homelessness. If elected, how would you address the needs of the unhoused residents of downtown?
Well, it's a really good question. I mean, it's kind of like the holy grail right now. Everybody is looking for that answer. And I think that it's a complex answer. I think that we absolutely need to build more. I mean, that is a major thing. But also, you know, when we have people moving here and tenting in parks from all over the province, that is also a major problem that is very much something that's bigger than what a city can handle a lot of the times. But I would suggest that that moving forward, we do have programs for people that are mentally at risk, you know, mental illness, people that have fallen into drug abuse. We need to go to the province and say, look, we need help in providing more funding for more programs. And building more. We need to build more. We need to look at other parts of the city where we can build affordable housing and focus on those areas. So, you know, when it comes to livability, that's where I stand. And I think that's what we really need to focus on in the future.
Thanks for that. The next question is for Stephen. Your platform commits to working through land use requirements to establish amenities to benefit the community and require new developments to provide doctors' offices as a means of trying to help address the current crunch we find ourselves in when it comes to healthcare. How do you envision this taking place? And how would it impact community amenity contributions for the neighborhoods in which developments might happen? In addition, would you consider a change to the community amenity formula as part of this policy?
Very simple. Yes, I would consider a change to the formula amenity proposal. So when a developer brings forth a proposal, what they can do is there are certain amenities they can offer to the city. By adding in clinic space for doctors, we then can in turn provide doctors with low or no cost rent. How we do that is because we're not allowed to give a direct benefit to a business, and that's what a doctor would be, is we could work with a non-for-profit such as the Victoria Health Co-op or Kool-Aid or any not-for-profit organization to set that up, and combined with the benefits that the province has already put forward, we could really entice clinicians from out of province, not other doctors in Saanich or elsewhere in BC. We can ensure that they can, that this is the place to come. They could get free to low cost house clinic space. We can also, I propose, giving them a permissive tax exemption on their property up to a 5-year benefit. So again, that will help them get established in Victoria. On the door, I'm hearing this time and time again, that this is something we need to do. We need to find a way where we can use land use amenities to bring about an opportunity for more clinicians to come to the city. We have to compete with Island Health, we were told in a meeting the other day, because they're taking them into some of the facilities and being hospitalists. Well, we need to provide incentives to keep them in the community. Right now, I get calls all the time, but people are saying we're in a situation where we are getting, sorry, I got distracted there, but people where we're getting.
Oh, Sorry, end of your time there, 90 seconds. Oh, sorry, I didn't catch that one, but yes, please no comments while the candidates are answering questions. It's very difficult, as both Stephen and I have experienced, to stay focused, even in my case, when you're reading a script. So just please respect people's time and let them answer the questions we're posing. So it's Marianne's turn for a how question. So we're talking about the official community plan, and the way your platform mentions it, it will have been operational for 10 years by the time we get to 2023, and that it is coming due for a review of its effectiveness. For those interested in land development in the downtown, there have been moments over these last 4 years when it has not felt like the OCP has been operational, with a number of variances being approved for developments in the downtown neighborhood. Recognizing there is great pressure to build housing and to build it quickly, how will you go about an OCP review, and what would you focus on?
Great question. And actually part of your question answers part of your question. The fact that there have been so many variances with the OCP in recent years really is telling into how it does not reflect the reality of the community in which we live right now. 10 years is a long time in land use, and it's certainly a long time when you have an evolutionary city like Victoria has become. Next year, actually it's 10 years old this year, but next year staff have already have it on their radar to do an internal review. Part of that has to actually look at what the changes have been between then and now. Then that has to go out, in my view, that has to go out for a very significant public discussion, very similar to what happened back in 2012 when the OCP was first imagined. That could take a year and a half if we do it properly. But really what we have to do is we have to look at how the OCP has changed the city, how it can change the city in a way which reflects what we want, what you want, and not just from the perspective of land use, but the perspective of how that land is lived on by all of us. So that you look at the parks acquisition plan, in addition to that, the green space acquisition plan, as I talked about before, the plazas and open spaces. It has to be land use and livability together if we're going to be able to create a document that can live for another 5 to 10 years. And I'm not sure 10 years is practical, but if we're going to have that conversation, we have to look at it much more holistically and begin to include not just the land use itself, but how the people live on the land. And part of that also has to do with some consultation with Indigenous folk, because it's their land, but it really has to focus on the people who live in the neighborhoods of the OCP. Big job, we can do it.
Thank you. So each candidate has one more question coming about their specific platform promises. And we're going back to Stephen for this one, talking about the transparent and accountable land application process included in your platform, which is that if elected, you would advocate to allow applicants and community association land use committees to address the committee of the whole. Last week, council moved to delay a decision to send the Starlight project to a public hearing until a new council has been elected. When this project comes before council in November, how do you foresee the process going with allowing applicants and community land use committee to address the committee of the whole on the process and impact of this project?
Thanks for the question. Very simply, this is a situation that used to occur in the city of Victoria, and for some reason it doesn't anymore. By restricting the applicant and the land use committees to having to come into the process way down the road when it's a public hearing, I think that we have missed opportunities. Many times we sit in council when we're considering whether send something forward to a public hearing, and we have questions. If we allow the land use committees and the applicant to make a statement to us, say no more than 5 minutes, in that process, I think we could move things through a lot quicker and certainly get some answers. Having to go through our staff, which have a full detailed report on what's going on, sometimes they're not answering the questions that we need answered. So if we're looking at being more transparent and there's an issue, for instance, if staff recommend that we don't approve something, I want to hear from the applicant and the land use committee at that time to say they can reject us and have an open and transparent discussion about where we're headed.
Thank you. And we're going back to Marianne for the next how question. Your platform states the city needs more public opportunities for Victorians to gather and share in public spaces. Given the dearth of green space in the downtown area and a history of charrettes being completed on the Ship Point, Reason Park, and Centennial Square without much sign of implementation at this point, how will you go about resourcing the park's implementation strategy within the city's Parks and Open Space Master Plan?
Great question. Thanks for that. I think I might have referenced a little bit of this earlier, but as we begin to accept the fact that our private spaces are smaller, we have to look more keenly at our public spaces. Parks acquisition plan is one way to do it, but beyond that, we have at least a half a dozen different plans sitting on a shelf at the city. Ship Point, a variety of things in James Bay, a couple of things that are on some of the parking lots downtown, all of which look at creating quite spectacular open spaces and public spaces for use, not just for the downtown residents, but for the city as a whole. All of those need to be implemented. Yes, they have some significant costs associated with them, but we know how they work, and many of them actually can be supplemented with funds from provincial and federal governments. Those grants are there. We just haven't pursued them. Yes, we've had other things on our agenda that have been a bit more time sensitive, we'll call it, but these are the things that will quite dramatically change the face of the downtown from a livability perspective. Not only those big projects, but they're actually, when you start mapping out the downtown in particular, but some of the peripheral neighborhoods as well, you'll see a fairly large range of quite small spaces that can be very uniquely turned into a gathering place, a social space, place for people that they don't get houses. We have a city that urban, you've been in up in the next few months.
You have stated in your platform that having a vibrant and beautiful city means having ample green space and a healthy city canopy. How would this commitment shape your work as mayor when considering applications for development downtown?
Well, I think that just about everybody in Victoria can agree that part of what makes Victoria so beautiful is the amount of green space that we have. I think that we need to continue to make more as we grow and as we expand. But I think that sometimes when you're trying to densify, it can be a lot more difficult to do that. But I think that we can make incentives for developers to put better setbacks. I mean, just look at Cook Street and how beautiful it is, and with the trees that go down there and the amount of green spaces. I think that we will, in some cases, may have to go a little bit taller in certain areas where we can get that green space down at the base, which I think is a good compromise. And so I think that we can do that in the planning and in development to make sure that we have that green space, and going a little higher, I think, is it having large bulky buildings that take up a lot of space on the ground. So yeah, I think that that's what we, and also able to utilize space.
Thank you very much. That concludes the how section of today's debate. And now we're headed into the home stretch with a final set of long form questions for each candidate. So still with the 90-second responses. And to the candidates, this is your last chance to use any remaining tokens that you have if you want to expand on some of your answers. The theme of the first question in this section is homelessness, and Marianne will be the first responder, followed by Stephen and then Brendan. Here's the question. With winter approaching once again and the number of people unhoused likely to exceed the number of spaces available to sleep in shelters in Victoria, what actions will you pursue to ensure that unhoused residents of the downtown neighborhood do not spend another winter without shelter options? Marianne is up first.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, we talked a little bit about that earlier when we talked about some of the facilities that need to go on Pandora, but it's not just Pandora. We have a fairly distributed group of unhoused folks around the city, all of whom need some type of temporary support as we go through the next 6 months, while we do the other work that's medium and long term, which we can talk about another time. But that involves some specific warming areas, some drying areas, washrooms, of course, as we talked about before, facilities that have distribution of food, particularly hot food, areas in emergency where people can go in just for a moment or two or a few hours, but areas also where we really cater to the fact that some of these folks will actually need to transition from being on the block to inside some type of not a commercial, a type of a shelter. I want to remind people that there's a shelter that works really beautifully that most people have forgotten exists up on Yates Street called My Place. That's in the old Boys and Girls Club. It is a really unique model, which took a derelict building, allowed folks to move in, take their own stuff, and actually tent inside with privacy and supports and whatnot. And those types of things actually can be done really fast, have good oversight, have not-for-profits working with them, and create a very temporary, that's going into a longer term, but a very temporary and safe place. They have to be small. They can't have large numbers. They have to have good support systems. They have to be in partnership for not-for-profits. Those programs can actually be delivered very, very quickly. And that's the type of thing we need to look at to have in place by early to mid-November so that we can carry it through into March and then deal with proper housing.
Thank you. And up next is Stephen with 90 seconds.
Thanks. Many people may not know this, but I was homeless when I was 22 for a year and a half. I lived in Toronto at the time, and I will tell you it's extremely difficult once you're in that situation to find a place to live, and the shelters are not the most inviting or even secure places to spend the night. So I think that is a huge issue. I do not believe that tenting is an appropriate solution to homelessness. I think that we need a scattered regional model across Greater Victoria. We cannot just rely on everything in Victoria. We need to work with our partners and other municipalities so that they can carry some of the weight with us. And obviously, we need to ensure that we have more spaces. We began this journey many years ago when Councillor Thornton Joe and then Rick Anthony with the Victoria Police Department realized we had a challenge, and they started opening places such as Silver Threads. I think that we need to do that. We need to start looking today. And as mayor, within the first 30 days, I can assure you, I will be looking to ensure that we have open spaces inside so that people can come in from the cold and have a warm place to sleep, live, and eat.
Thank you. And now it's Brendan's turn with 90 seconds to respond.
I think that yeah, absolutely. I mean, as the days get shorter and colder, there's definitely going to be people that are living on the street are going to need help. But I also think that with the way things are headed, Victoria is going to be overcapacitated with more people coming from other parts of the province and the island, perhaps all over the world. And I think that what we have a responsibility, when these people, we have to be compassionate. We have to think about the humanity, and I mean, these are human beings after all. And I think that what we really need to do is really be clear about and have programs that enable us to figure out how and when these folks got to the place that they're at. And because we've got a diverse amount of people that come from all different walks of life, and they all have different reasons for why they're on the street, and different reasons for why they're home, why they're unhoused. And I think that we need to be very mindful about the needs, the different diverse needs of people. For instance, having people that are this addicted to drugs and are suffering from mental illness, and then you have people sort of all stuffed together that some of the people have just fallen through the cracks, and they're not necessarily addicted to drugs or have a mental illness, but they're hard up on their luck. They can get themselves together, have a shower, and get to work. And then we've got people that are suffering from all kinds of mental illnesses. And I think that we have to be very mindful in our planning when people are going into gymnasiums or in different rec centers or whatnot, is that we don't have people that that are trying to work and trying to get themselves off the street alongside with that have a completely different assortment of, and I think we have to be mindful of that we move forward in a positive way.
Thank you. Our longest answer so far with 2 tokens used. Our next question is on food security. This time, Stephen will be the first to answer, followed by Brendan and then Marianne. Here's the question. A growing number of residents and families in downtown are food insecure and rely on local charitable food services for access to regular food. While residents in other neighborhoods may be able to supplement their pantries with food they can grow on their own land, that can be more difficult downtown due to limited access to land and a higher number of people living in high rises. What food security issues do you feel are imperative for the new mayor and council to address, and how do you see them connected to climate justice?
Thank you, Marianne, for that. I think a number of issues that we need to look at. I was honored to be at the opening of the Orca Community Gardens that was in Vic West the other day, and they've done a fabulous job there. I think that we need to ensure that we have more community gardens across the city. I don't think that it can be the downtown neighborhoods are exclusive of that. I think we can look for opportunities that are there. There are an opportunity to expand green areas in the downtown area. When we do that, I think that we should be looking at that opportunity to install community gardens to make sure that is done. As far as food security, definitely we need to do a better job, I think, of supporting organizations such as Our Place with the food that they provide to our vulnerable populations. We definitely need to also add more support to places such as Mustard Seed. So I see it's going to have to be what I would call as food, obviously. We can come to support.
Thank you for that. Now it's Brendan's turn with 90 seconds.
Well, I completely I think that it's absolutely important that people are able to grow in their homes and in their yards, and I think there's some incredible programs that are out there right now. Urban farmers and people that want to use the land for growing food, and I think that as mayor, I would most definitely support those initiatives, and I think that allocating and some land for community gardens is very important. I remember myself growing up in James Bay as a kid. I grew up in a housing cooperative there, and it was I have some very fond memories of banding together with my neighbors and growing vegetable gardens and going together with my neighbors to the community gardens that were up a block away from there. And of course, now today they're all built up and there's buildings on those where those community gardens were. But I most definitely think that we should support urban farming, whichever way we can, and really just some incredible people out there that are very savvy, and I think that we could just let it fly and let people grow their vegetables and do their thing, and like I said before, allocate some land over for those people as well.
As a big fan of growing vegetables, I would love to have more space to do that. It's now Marianne's turn to answer the question with 90 seconds.
Thanks very much. I think there's 2 pieces here. One is the absolute support for organizations like Mustard Seed that provide food for vulnerable. But I heard the question a little bit differently. I heard it related to land use and climate change. And I think what's absolutely essential here is that we need to look at new builds with requirements for developers to actually use every conceivable space to actually do green roofs, green balconies, green walls, things where you can actually begin to look at the development of a building as something that is a component of the ecosystem of being able to grow things. That's something that not only will provide food security, but it will actually really have a significantly positive effect on dealing with climate adaptation, air quality, GHGs, all of the things that we talked about earlier. That we can do, and it's a simple act because we can actually look at it as part of what we're required in land use applications. In addition to that, there are still a few pockets left in the downtown, just like the small garden that's on Yates near Vancouver, that still are actually usable for the more traditional type of land-based gardening. And we do have a few of those left. We can also talk about when we look at the big projects like Ship Point, some of the original designs of that actually had green roofs that extended right out from Wharf Street, so that all of the materials that you saw, parking, different types of commercial access, were below the entire just grass. It was actually areas where you had pocket gardens. And so those types of developments are something that actually are completely feasible, are done in many of the countries, and we can require. It'll affect food security in a positive way and also climate adaptation.
All right, we've got 2 more questions to go. The next one, the theme is green space and parks. And this time, Brendan will go first, followed by Marianne, and then Stephen. The downtown neighborhood, and specifically Harris Green, is currently slated to absorb a lot of new development in the city. And we're going to talk about the Starlight Project, which would cover nearly 5 acres between View and Yates, founded by Quadra and Cook, and could add over 2,000 residents to the neighborhood. Currently, downtown has 3 small parks, 2 of which are viewed as unsafe by some housed residents, and the third is on the outer edge of the neighborhood. With the downtown core densifying, what will you do as mayor to ensure equitable public access to free, unfenced green space for downtown residents? 90 seconds.
Well, first of all, we have currently, like you said, the 2 of these parks are a biohazard, and then there's no real easy way to go about addressing that reality, is that our green space is fastly becoming unusable because of the situation down there. And as far as the Starlight Project, I thought it's absurd to me that projects are taking 3 years to get going. I mean, figure it out. We have to figure it out, and we need the housing. I think maybe that project was a bit of a red herring. I think there's other parts of the city that we could most definitely be putting higher buildings. Perhaps that building was a little high, but I think that at the same time, we have to densify. We have to sometimes go up a little higher in order to have those green spaces. And like I said before, I would definitely make incentives for developers to go a little higher per se, in order to have better setbacks, more green space down below. But if we need to be able to have accessible green space, we need to have clean green space. We can't be living in a biohazard as well. So, I mean, this are problems that are pretty big, but we have to address them.
All right. Thank you for that response. And now it's Marianne's turn. 90 seconds.
So downtown, parklets, different uses of roadways, better pedestrian infrastructure, all of the different ways that you actually create these small spaces that are welcoming and bringing people together to create relationships. The important thing for us to remember here is that we are no longer a big town. We are a city. Cities evolve, and cities create density while creating green spaces and open spaces and collective spaces. There are many, many, many examples of cities who are in our predicament, who are in this evolutionary place between big town and small city, who have done just that. Part of it is around land use, part of it is around development, part of it is around requiring the types of infrastructure that we just talked about a minute ago, around green roofs, green balconies, green walls, all of the different things that can be accessed to create that sense of being outdoors and create that oxygenation, that healthy sense of being part of a living city. When we do both the ground-oriented things as well as the building-oriented things, and we marry that with a few, and there are a few still quite exciting larger parcels that are in the downtown core, we have to grab those. There's 3 or 4 that any one of you in this room can actually identify that are still half a block or more. We have to make sure that we identify those as potential open spaces before we build anything on them. We've got lots of density going up, and it will go up, but as long as we can identify 2 or 3 of those remaining lots and actually say, hold this one, That's where we'll create something truly unique and truly something that reflects our evolution as a city that has spaces.
All right, and now it's Stephen's turn, 90 seconds.
Incorporating the issue of the Starlight development in Harris Green, we definitely need to ensure that we have more green space in that area, because as we build up, as my fellow mayoral candidates have said, we need to ensure that we are planning space where we can have expanded parks and green spaces. Definitely, I think 2023 is going to be the year of creating parks and green spaces. There are a number of areas that I have personally mapped out in my mind. I would like to see more of a park area on Broad Street between Broughton and Fort. We can do that since we're close enough that area there. I think we can take advantage of building park spaces on Pandora. Believe it or not, I think we can do that. We need to adjust some of the issues that are in that area, but we can do that. And I see that once we get the Northern Junk building there to the north of Northern Junk, there is a parking lot that's going to be used for staging that construction, but I can see a downtown park definitely going in there. So I think what we do is we look for the opportunities, we ensure that they're there as we do a Government Street refresh. We put more greenery into those spaces. So we're not just pouring concrete, we're actually planting and growing our city in a very organic way.
Thank you for that answer. We're now on to our final question, and the theme is polarization and community. This time, Marianne will be the first to answer, followed by Stephen and then Brendan. So here's the question, and it is a little bit long, so please bear with me. There's been a lot of discussion recently about increasing polarization in society, with issues driving wedges between neighbors and family members. Homelessness and sheltering in public spaces is one issue that has become increasingly contentious in Victoria over the past few years. As mayor of Victoria, what would you do to bring people from different political stances together and to encourage empathy and understanding between those who are housed and those who are not downtown in order to make life in the city better for everyone? Marianne is up first. Yep, use it or lose it.
That is probably the most important question I think that's been asked today, because everything that we've talked about and all of the plans that we all have and all of the materials that we have on our websites really relies on us determining how we're going to exist as a community. In the last couple of years, we've really been isolated, and we've, I believe, allowed ourselves to use that isolation to disconnect from one another. When we talk about green spaces and meeting spaces and collaboration and collectivism, it's all about creating relationships, and we haven't done a good job of that over the last few years, and council hasn't done that either. You know, council went inside and did all of its meetings online and really lost touch, I think, to a certain extent, with how to have that conversation with residents. Moving forward, we have to provide a series of different types of manners in which we can actually come together, whether it's live, as we do sometimes now too, whether it's utilizing a kind of a hybrid model. Whatever we think works, we have to create those opportunities for us to be able to have real space. We want what from a town to a city. If we can create those places and those mechanisms for being able to have those conversations in a respectful, thoughtful, reasonably calm way, we will find out where we have our common dreams. And I truly believe that that's the case. As a facilitator, it's my job to come to rooms with people who come in hating one another and having profoundly different views, and pulling them together and allowing them to find their own paths to that common dream. That's exactly what council has a role in doing. It has to provide the ways for decisions to be made collectively in a way which is respectful, understands that we're different, but ultimately we really want to have the same thing. It's a vibrant city.
Thank you for that response. Up next is Stephen with 90 seconds. Oh, we're being proactive with the tokens now. All right, 2 minutes to respond to the final question.
Thank you. I believe that we need to take character assassination and character politics out of the municipal area. Leave that for those that are in other forms yelling at one another to try to defeat what a position has been taken. So we need to work together. And as mayor, I'm going to work to be collaborative, to ensure that everyone has their chance in the spotlight, to ensure that everybody is heard. We need to ensure that. We need to ensure that the residents, the voters, and the business people that make our city run are heard. We need to ensure that that happens. And we do have different political opinions. The key is, I think, is to listen with respect, sit down, try to find common ground. And where we can't, we're going to have to make the tough decisions. But one of the things that I have seen over the past 2 years is very often what I see within the world of politics is what I call top-down decisions, where we sit there, we decide what's going to happen, and then we try to convince everybody this is the way to go. It's not. Local politics, to me, is being as close to a democracy as we possibly can. If we're not listening to that electorate, we're not listening to those voices, then we're not doing our job. I've held many meetings outside of the issues that we hear at the council table to hear what the public has to say. And to me, it's when we walk away and we hear something really profound, something that we had not thought of at the table, is what I think is exciting. So we need to listen, we need to collaborate, and we need to get down to the job of governing, not politicking.
Thank you for that answer. Applause to the end, please. Guys, we're getting close. You can just let loose once they do their closing statements, I promise. It's now Brendan's turn to answer the question.
Of the question. once more?
Absolutely. 1 second here. So we're talking about polarization.
Yeah.
Okay. And 90 seconds to respond.
I think there's no, I put my thing in here.
All right, 2 minutes.
There's really too much shortage of that these days. We live in a world of polarization, and then you start to see it on a civic level, and it's very disturbing. People, I think, really need to, and I think everybody needs to take responsibility for what they say and for their actions. Okay, so I think a big part of the healing process, and I think it's absolutely true that COVID has definitely put people in their little box, and that's really tough. That's a really big thing to go through, and I think that people have gone through a tremendous amount of difficulties. Yeah, and I think that people deserve to give themselves a pat on the back at this point. But we do have to move forward. We do have to work together. We do have to be real with one another, and we do have to address the issues. And I think that we can do it when we really just come from the heart. I think we need to start in the heart. We need to get back out of our heads, get into our heart, and work with one another that way. Moving forward, yeah, I think that's really the way forward. Is doing it like that, and yeah, I really thank you all for coming out today.
All right. And with that, we are moving into closing statements. So I'll thank all our candidates for a very civil and policy focused debate. Really appreciate that, as well as the respect for the time clock. So you're each going to have 2 minutes to wrap up your responses. And we're going to do this in the opposite order from how we did our opening statements. So Marianne Alto is going to go first with 2 minutes.
Great, thanks. First, thanks everyone for coming out today. This is really quite amazing to see a room full of people who are interested in local politics. Thank you. So please make sure that you continue to be interested, and by all means, the most important thing for every single one of you is to vote and take 10 people with you. So I commit you to that particular charge. All of us have websites. All of us have spoken today a little bit about touching on some of the themes that we think are important for you to consider as you cast your votes. I urge you to go and explore them all. Mine is altomayor.ca, altomayor.ca. I'm not going to speak specifically about all of the things that you can read on that. I just want to leave you with a few thoughts. I think one of the things that you're going to be faced with as voters is anticipating what type of council you want to manage the next 4 years. We can give you a list of all of the things we'd like to accomplish. We can even support that list with a variety of different rationales and histories. All of that you'll find online. But what you really need to consider is what is it that you want in your qualities as a mayor and your qualities as council members. For me, that means that this is a 4-year term in which we're going to face some really unusual and extreme challenges around many of the issues we've talked about today. That means you want someone who has experience, you want someone who's unflappable, you want someone who's patient, you want someone who has integrity, you want somebody who has the ability to bring people together and create that safe space for passionate debate and heated argument, and still be able to say, we found a way forward and now let's go out and have coffee. I think that I've demonstrated over my 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, that I have all of those qualities. That is the type of counselor that I've been. That is the type of mayor that I would like to be. If you have any questions, you can always contact me anytime through the website or any time to here today. For me, the most important thing to leave you with is that you must vote. It is your privilege, it is your honor, and I would be thrilled if you voted for me.
Thanks for that. There you go. Okay. Up next, we're going to have 2 minutes or up to 2 minutes of closing remarks from Stephen Andrew.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity to challenge your questions and tell you a little bit about my policies. Again, my website is stephenandrew.ca. I do have experience. I've covered politics in this city for 20 years, and I've been on council for nearly 2 years as well. So I've seen it from the outside and I've seen it from the inside. And what I've heard on the doorstep, and what I've heard for the past 2 years is that Victorians want change. They do not want the attitudes of the past 4 to 8 years. They want someone who's prepared to come in and face these issues that we have in our city head on. And that includes dealing with homeless, dealing with housing, dealing with staying in our lane as a municipal government. And it also means increasing safety throughout the entire city. I will do that as mayor. I promise you, I live here. I know the issues. I live with them every single day. I have lived with the impact of the pandemic, just steps from my front door. I've traveled through the city and seen what it's done to our city. I am not just going to vote at the council table and then go home at night. I am going to go home at night and I will experience the effects of the decisions that I make. And I think there's something else that I think is really important for any politician that I certainly have dealt with over the years. We are going to make errors. They have to apologize for listening to you.
Thank you for those remarks. And final closing statements from Brendan Marshall.
Well, first I'll say I'll start with what Henry VIII said to his 6 wives before I get going. But what he said was, "Let's make this short." I think that it's important to vote. Absolutely. I mean, I think there's going to be a tremendous amount. There already is a huge amount of interest in this election across the province. And that's really exciting because what it means is that people want change. They want change from the regular, the same old. I think that people are ready to move forward in a different way. People are ready to see some fresh blood you know, in the municipalities. And you know, to ask for your vote is a lot. It's a lot, for particularly for someone that comes from a place of no experience in municipal politics. However, you know, I've been watching. I'm from here. I've definitely taken interest in it in recent months. And I think that, you know, as a small business owner, I do understand many of the challenges that people face in their day-to-day lives. And as a father and a husband and a family person, I think I do identify very much with young families, that what they're going through in municipality. And so it is a lot to ask for your vote, but I assure you, I will not be the same old. And I definitely want to see great things happen. That with your help, we can do this. So once again, thank you all so much for coming out and listening to us today. And I hope to see you around in the coming weeks before the election. Have a great night.
Thanks so much. All right, so that is the end of the debate. Thank you so much for coming. One thing I want to plug just before I step away from the microphone for Sandra is, if you are trying to make up your mind about which candidates running for mayor and council support policies that you feel are important and values that you hold, you can check out Capital Daily's database. We have over 100 responses from candidates across Greater Victoria telling us in long form and yes or no what they would do if elected. You can find that on our database. And I believe at least one of the current mayoral candidates has filled that out so far. And I'm happy to connect with the others if you have not yet. Okay, we've got altos now too. Thank you so much.
So a thank you to Marianne and to Stephen and to Brendan for their generous offer of time this afternoon. Hard job to do. Glad it's them and not some of us. Thank you to DRA board members and volunteers who have been supportive in pulling this together, and also to the Vic Theatre for hosting. A big thanks to Shannon Waters for her humor and her ability to keep this conversation on track. Reminder that the election is October 15th with advanced polls on the 5th, the 11th, and the 12th at City Hall. We have a survey that's up on our website. So if you want to go and have a look at that, please also have a look at the responses. And for those who are interested in hearing from candidates tomorrow, engaging in really intimate conversation one-on-one, there is an event at the Atrium on Yates tomorrow night at 7 p.m., 7 to 9. So we've invited the 5 mayoral candidates who were not here today to be at that, as well as the 37 people who are running for council. Not all will be there. Some are not able to be there, but there will be a good selection of people. So if you have questions that you need answered, this is an opportunity tomorrow night, Monday night, to actually do that. And thank you. Thank you for coming on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. And thanks also to those who were tuned in on Zoom. And the tape of this will be available on YouTube, and you can go to the DRA's website for information about how to link to that. Thank you very much.
Oh my God, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd love to.
Thank you. It's always nice to have people sitting so it doesn't feel like they're trying to.
Have a good day. Thank you. And yes, I do read once in a while.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so it was nice to finally meet someone from Capital Daily.
Yeah, I'm one of the